I'm Joseph. This is Input English. I've arrived in another destination. This is Monterey, California. Monterey is on Monterey Bay on the Pacific Ocean in Northern California. I drove about an hour to get here today, and it's lovely. It's about noon on a weekday, so it's not super busy. Early in the spring, a light breeze, it should be perfect. It's been a long time since I've been in Monterey, certainly since long before the pandemic. You know, we all went through that pandemic, and that pretty much curtailed travel for a lot of us, so I didn't get down here for that period. More recently, I've been able to get out and visit places I haven't been in years, and this is one of those places. Where I'm standing is an open area. This is a historical park with historical buildings behind us. There's a museum there. When one is driving, there's an opportunity to think about things, get in touch with your thoughts. And as I was driving down here, I realized I have lived in California for more than 30 years. But that was not continuous. There were two epochs. There was the first time of about 9 years when I was on the faculty of the University of California at Davis. Those were good years. That's when we lived on a ranch outside of Sacramento. We raised some cattle, and I made videos about that experience. We didn't take a lot of photographs around the ranch, and the photographs I did take were made on film, so those pictures are in boxes, and it would be hard to lay my hands on them. So I've not shared images of what it was like on the ranch. Now that may change because as I go through the house and organize things, I may come upon some interesting images and make some videos using those images. I'm not opposed to doing that. The second episode of living in California was the past 21, almost 22 years when we moved back to the San Jose area. That also has been a very good experience, very positive. Coming to Monterey was something we've always done. When my kids were young, bringing them here was an obvious thing that we did. When we were living in Sacramento and the kids would come visit, we would come over here to entertain them. One of the great attractions for bringing kids to Monterey is the Monterey Aquarium. We were very devoted supporters of the Monterey Aquarium. We had memberships, we donated to them. It's a very good organization, and it's right here. One time when I was on the UC Davis faculty, my kids came to visit, and I decided to bring them down here to Monterey. But it was no ordinary trip. We decided to take the airplane. Back in that era, we had a small airplane that I kept at the airport. It might sound like a luxury possession, but I assure you it was not. It was a humble single-engine aircraft. It was well maintained, but it wasn't fancy. The reason we had it was for flight training, and the flight training that occurred in that aircraft was mine, my daughter's flight training, and also other people who got instruction at the flight school, and they would pay to use our airplane. So the way we had set it up with the flight school, we never made a lot of money having that airplane, but we also didn't lose a lot. The airplane substantially paid for itself. So on the trip down here to Monterey, my son was in the right seat and I was in the left seat. Traditionally, left seat is pilot in command. Both the kids had headsets on, and we had a microphone so that we could talk to each other with the intercom. On the way down, my son asked if he could control the aircraft, and that was perfectly safe and reasonable. We were at altitude, and He's a reliable young man, so there was no problem with that. He only flew on the en route section of the trip, and when we came into this area and descended to land, the airplane was mine again. On the return trip, it was my daughter in the right seat and me in the left seat. We took off and climbed to altitude. Now, when you take off from Monterey Airport, it takes you out over the Pacific Ocean, which is interesting. It's quite an experience to fly out over the Pacific Ocean. That we did, and then we had to watch for traffic because there are other aircraft in that area. Eventually it was clear and we turned to the right and eventually headed back inland. But for the first 10 or 15 minutes of our flight, we were out over the Pacific. When we got up to altitude, my daughter wanted to fly the aircraft. And so I gave her a quick briefing and the airplane was hers. That was the trip that I discovered what a talented pilot she was. She held wings level. She maintained proper altitude. Her control of the aircraft was absolutely impeccable. We went through some en route maneuvers, turning 15 degrees to the right, turning 15 degrees to the left, and I would tell her what I wanted to do, and she would do it. That was the day I discovered that she indeed was a talented, capable young pilot. That would not be the last time we flew together. I made a video about that, which is in our video library. Behind me is the Fisherman's Wharf, so I'm going to walk in that direction and see what we can see, what I can find to show you at this wonderful location, Monterey, California. I came upon something really fun and interesting, which I just have to share. As you can see, this is a ship's anchor. It's very old and rusty, and if you look at it closely, you can see it has a grain to it. It almost looks like wood. It almost has a wood grain to it. You can see that grain throughout the entire structure. The parts of an anchor all have names. This part here is called the fluke. I don't really know the names of the other parts, so I can't show off. But I am familiar with this grain where it looks kind of similar to the grain of wood. That's because this anchor was not made out of steel. It's made out of wrought iron. And so when they made this, they added a high content of carbon to it. And the manufacturing process made these layers. So some parts of it have very low carbon content, other areas have very high carbon content, and this grain presumably adds to the strength of this structure. Of course, they're way overbuilt. These are gigantic structures. But whenever you see old metal with this apparent wood grain or a recapitulation of wood grain, think wrought iron. We're going to talk about that in future videos. So this is another anchor. The sign says that it was salvaged from the bottom of Monterey Bay in 1944. The reason I show it to you is this is not made out of wrought iron. This is made out of bronze. Look at the patina. Where it's been rubbed, you can see some bare metal, but most of this is covered with patina, and this is a bronze anchor. Okay, so we have arrived at the Fisherman's Wharf. So over there is the Fisherman's Wharf. We're going to go down there. You'll see more of that. And then behind me over here is the marina. This is where people keep nice boats. As I turn around here, behind me now is the old customs house. This is a historical building that people can visit. This is very much a tourist destination. a lot of gift shops, a lot of restaurants. So I stepped off onto a little side path, and this boat behind me is a boat for whale watching. So they sell tickets, they go out several times a day. Looking at the signs, it looks like $25 is a common price. I didn't really do a deep dive on the pricing of these because I'm not planning on going whale watching today, but that's a whale watching boat. My wife and I went out on, I think, that boat or a boat like that was docked in that position a number of years ago, and it had about 100 people on it. And we went out into the bay and we saw a lot of whales. They did their job. They showed us a lot of whales, but it was a little rough that day. And so to my eye, my wife and I were the only two paid passengers on the whole boat who were not seasick. What we saw is that people got dreadfully seasick. People were throwing up all over the place. And I talked to one of the crew, and his job on that trip was to gather water from the sea and rinse down the deck to clean up the mess. So now it's time to walk back. I don't plan on going whale watching today, and I don't plan on having one of these rich meals. The food here is quite good, but it's quite rich. People come here on vacation, and I don't criticize anybody who comes here and has a good time with a rich meal. One of the problems we have with video is I can't share the smells. Every time I walk past one of these restaurants, the aroma of what they're presenting for their customers comes wafting out, and it's really quite a sensation, quite an experience. I have extricated myself from the Fisherman's Wharf area. I'm back near the Custom House. And now I'm about to take the walk, which you see behind me. It's a bike path, walking path, and it leads over to Cannery Row. So that's my next stop. So this is San Carlos Beach. You can get access to the water from here, and we did years ago. As I've said in other videos, I used to do a lot of scuba diving. There were a bunch of friends at work and acquaintances who traveled together, and we typically would buy a plane ticket and head off to the Caribbean or to Mexico to beautiful locations for scuba diving. At one point, one of us thought, there's very good scuba diving right here in Monterey Bay, so why don't we organize a dive trip and go diving in Monterey Bay? So we hatched the plan and came down here on a Saturday. It was a cold day, and we had all our gear, so we put our gear together and walked into the water. It was incredibly cold. Basically, we all completely froze. We did see a lot of good stuff. The visibility was quite poor, so everything you saw was very close to you. We were used to diving in the Caribbean where visibility was hundreds of feet, and you got a very panoramic view of what was around you. But diving Monterey Bay, your visibility is perhaps in dozens of feet. And so frequently we would come upon something as we got right to it. What we saw was some very interesting invertebrates on the bottom, and we also saw tremendous numbers of giant jellyfish. They were red, they were gigantic, and you didn't see them until you were right upon them. I wouldn't have wanted to miss that dive trip, but I definitely got into the territory of hypothermia. Luckily, over here behind me, there is a pier, and on that pier, there is a bath facility that actually has showers. It's coin operated, or it was coin operated when we were here, And so with every quarter I could find in the car, I went in there and put on a hot shower and tried to find the antidote to my hypothermia. That was one fine hot shower to get warmed up. So I have very fond feelings about this beach, but at the same time, there's not a prayer I'm going to come back down here and dive and get that cold again. Well, we are very much in Cannery Row now. You can see behind us lots of restaurants, lots of tourist boutiques, a lot of souvenirs to be bought and sold here. This little park off of Cannery Row has a sculpture, a big bronze sculpture that was installed in 2014. It's called the Cannery Row Monument, and it depicts a bunch of the characters in the novel Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. So here is that statue. We are now at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. This is a little patio where you can look out. You can see the kelp forest, you can see the shore, and you can see a good bit of Monterey Bay. Over here is the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We're outside that aquarium. What I'd like to find next is Ed Ricketts' lab, so I can show you that. So I'm on a little discovery mission to see if I can scare up the lab that belonged to Ed Ricketts, and explain it, of course. Here's the entrance of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I don't plan on going in today. I've been in it many times. It's a fabulous place to visit, but it's beyond the scope of today's video. Behind me is the Pacific Biological Laboratory. This was the place that Ed Ricketts worked. He actually lived in this building for a while. Ed Ricketts was a very good friend of John Steinbeck, and he provided a lot of material for Steinbeck's various novels. It has been said that having Ed Ricketts as a friend was the best thing that ever happened to John Steinbeck's writing. It has also been said that Ed Ricketts' death in 1948 was the worst thing that ever happened to John Steinbeck's writings. This place here, this location, is not open to the public today. Historically, it has been, but there's no sign that they have it open for visitors at this point. We're in the middle of the locale, the setting for Cannery Row, the novel. This is where the characters who inspired this book lived at the time, and this is the setting that John Steinbeck used for the action in the book. Well, I've started the walk back to the car. I checked my phone for distance, and the Monterey Bay Aquarium was 1.2 miles from the car. So I've got about a 20-minute walk back from here. This is a little park with a fountain and a great place to get a good view of the Monterey Bay. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.